Hello, Genies. Before we get started, Rich and I want to let you in on some even more exciting updates for our Patreon subscribers.
As you know, Patreon is a site where listeners can pledge a small monthly amount, either $5 or $10, to support the cost of bringing you your favorite podcast. All patrons get early access to new CutOff Jeans episodes before they're released to the public.
But the most exciting new perk is that all of our patrons will be able to listen to an exclusive bonus episode of the podcast every other week. Topics include personal stories that I'm not ready to share publicly, conversations with family and friends.
And sometimes we'll devote an entire episode to other subjects we love, like musical theater or classic television.
Rich and I enjoy bringing you the CutOff Jeans podcast, and it would mean so much if you would consider supporting our labor of love.
Just go to patreon.com/cutoffjeanspodcast.
Thank you so much, my Genies.
And now, on with the show. Is your family tree a mystery? Are you fascinated by genealogy? Well, hip, hip, hooray, let's talk DNA with Julie.
The truth is in your genes.
In CutOff Jeans.
Welcome to CutOff Jeans, the podcast that helps you find your truth using nothing but DNA. I'm Julie Dixon Jackson. I'm a genetic genealogist, henceforth known as a Gen Genie.
And I am Richard Castle, the co-host and producer of this podcast. How's it going today, Julie?
It's going well. I'm a little foggy.
Allow me to clear the skies for you.
Please do.
I'm heading out to Palm Springs for the weekend, this coming weekend, and I'm looking forward to being in the sun because the last time I went, it rained.
All right. Yeah, hopefully it won't rain this weekend. My friend Betsy, you remember Betsy?
Yes.
Who lost her husband in February?
Yes.
She has sold her home in Walla Walla. And is in the process of buying a condo in Palm Springs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm excited to have her close by.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Wow, she's really changing her whole life.
Yeah. I mean, the home, they have this beautiful home in Walla Walla that was built for Nels, essentially, because he was a quadriplegic. And so it was built for somebody with this type of disability, far too big for her to live in alone, obviously.
Yes.
And she has been longing for warmer weather.
I understand that.
Yeah. So she'll spend her winters in Palm Springs and probably her summers in Walla Walla, in gorgeous Walla Walla.
How nice.
Yeah.
I attended a memorial for a mutual friend of ours, Dwayne Poole.
Oh, how was that?
It was actually the most beautiful memorial I've ever been to. And I shouldn't call it a memorial. It was a celebration of life. And it was done at the El Portal Theater.
Mm-hmm. I saw
Yes,
yeah.
it was like a cabaret, you know, but with people making speeches and singing songs, and it was lovely. Now, for our audience, Dwayne Poole was a screenwriter. He wrote a lot of Hallmark Christmas movies, and he wrote some musicals. He was a really nice man, and he wrote for animation. He did a lot over his career, and he was a great guy, and had like people who've been on Broadway get up there and sing, and it was moving and funny and beautiful, and it was a privilege to be in a room with so much love and talent.
Yeah. There was another memorial last night at the Pasadena Playhouse for Peggy Hickey. Did you know Peggy?
I know the name, but I don't.
So she was started out as a dancer, was a choreographer, was a Broadway choreographer, and a fixture in Southern California theater. And she'd been fighting cancer for many, many years.
Yeah.
But she was beloved. And so there was the Pasadena Playhouse was kind enough to offer the theater for her memorial last night. Which I also missed. No, I didn't go.
Okay.
Well, you know what? I never worked with Peggy, and I actually did not know her personally. But I know of her, and I have many friends who adored her. Yeah. I've seen a lot of pictures this morning from it, and it looked like it was a wonderful celebration.
There's something so beautiful about having a memorial for someone who was, in the
arts.
in the showbiz.
Yep.
In a theater, in a live theater with people, and having people perform. It was more personal because it was their business and it was
Yes.
what they loved. And so for people to get up and sing songs for somebody, that was really lovely. So anyway, let's get on to the business of the day, which is DNA.
Right. It is the business of the day. Okay, I'm going to start with an interesting message I got on my website.
Okay.
And here is the question. Do you provide DNA collection services discreetly? I already found my biological father's location, but I need a DNA sample collected discreetly. Can you help?
Oh, dear.
So the short answer to that is no, I cannot help. A discreet or surreptitious DNA collection is something that is left to law enforcement, and for cases that are
crimes,
exactly. And so I think I could get in a lot of trouble if I do that. Also, the only way that I can collect DNA for use of proving paternity is if I sit there and watch somebody spit into a tube for 5 minutes.
Right.
So I don't have the ability to, collect somebody's DNA off of a straw and turn it into an autosomal
and
sample.
I think that's unethical if it's not involving a crime.
Agreed. I will agree with that. What I did, so I responded, no, I don't, and I don't think that's legal. But she doesn't need his DNA to prove that he is her father necessarily. She just needs an to do her own DNA and have a genetic genealogist
or
work
somebody
with her.
in her family, right? Somebody close to her might. Isn't that how a lot of this happens?
Somebody in his family has probably done a DNA test, at least one.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody very close, and even if not too close, it would be very for an experienced genetic genealogist. We could probably get to the bottom of that for her.
Right. Yeah.
So
it's such an odd thing, right? It's
yeah.
I don't know anything that you've said on this podcast or on social media that would have led anybody to believe that you would be in the business of surreptitiously collecting DNA. But
right. But she found me some way, so she was probably Googling.
Sure.
Genetic genealogy or DNA or something like that. I don't know. But yeah. So if she would like to take an ancestry DNA test, I'd be happy to help her.
There you go.
But I'm not in the business of following someone and collecting their trash. Yeah. All right, let's talk about, so Laura High is a donor-conceived person, and she has a very active TikTok page. She is an activist against fertility fraud.
Okay.
So one of her TikToks, she was having a conversation with somebody named Brad. Let me first say fertility fraud is when a doctor knowingly switches out the chosen donor DNA for their own or any other that they feel like.
And we've had stories on this podcast of that many times. Unfortunately, more than I'd like to remember.
Correct. So Brad found out when he took a DNA test that his father was not his father, and he talked to his father, and his father admitted it. But the shocking part is he said, "So what do you want me to tell your mother?" So apparently the mother didn't know. This gentleman had been in a previous marriage, and during that marriage had a vasectomy, but told Brad's mother that he had it reversed, which he had not.
Okay.
And so they tried and couldn't conceive, obviously. So they went to a fertility doctor, and in private, he consulted with the doctor who agreed to switch out the DNA. So the mother was told that they were using her husband's DNA when in fact they were not.
Oh, that is so icky.
Isn't that disgusting?
Oh my God. And
right.
And just the ethics of a doctor conspiring with the husband and not including the wife in that decision, and in that, with that information, or letting her have a say in it.
Right. And it's so funny because this video got comments from people saying, "Hey, he made sure she got a kid. What's she complaining about?"
Oh, no.
I mean, so both Brad and Brad's mother are dealing with this now. That it's inconceivable. No pun intended. Wow. I do not think that word means what you think it means.
I think we have a new title for this podcast episode.
Yes! Oh, perfect. So let's talk about the state of fertility fraud in this country. There are only 11 states in the U.S. that currently have fertility fraud regulations, meaning that fertility fraud is considered illegal. I mean, fraud is considered illegal in general, right?
Right.
Those states are California, Arizona, Utah, Colorado, Texas, Florida, Iowa, Arkansas, Indiana, Ohio, who just in December enacted their new laws, and Kentucky. But there is a new legislation, HR 451, that is being enacted or trying to be enacted for common sense legislation and regulations surrounding the donor conception industry to make fertility fraud illegal federally, so that none of the people in those 49 remaining states can commit fertility fraud and get away with it.
It's amazing that they have to do that, but I understand why.
And you can help by contacting because this is federal, you can contact your local legislature and demand that they sponsor this bill. It's HR 451.
There you go.
So we can all help with this one. So thank you, Laura High, for bringing that to the forefront. Laura's great. She's, I think she has a podcast or maybe a YouTube channel where she talks to people about fertility fraud. And she also talks about it a lot in her comedy, which is fun, which is...
have you engaged with her on TikTok?
I've not directly, and maybe I should.
You should reach out if we're talking about
it. I've commented certainly on her, and I think we know who each other is, but we've never,
Why don't we take a break?
Okay, let's.
If you're enjoying our podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review, or consider supporting us on our Patreon page, patreon.com/CutOff Jeans Podcast. Now back to Julie and me.
All right, let's talk about this story that you sent me, actually. And it has everything. It has DNA. It has Australia. It has murder.
Yeah. Something for everybody.
Something for everybody. Okay, so this man called John Vincent Damon told his son that he was an orphan from Chicago. But when his son did a DNA test, wanting to know more about his late father, so he'd passed away, he found out Damon was really William Leslie Arnold, a teenager found guilty of murdering his parents in the 1950s, who then escaped from prison and vanished.
Right. Yeah.
He escaped from prison.
And moved from America to Australia.
Correct. Well, first he went, so he was 16 at the time when he shot his parents and buried them in the backyard of their home.
Yeah, as one does.
Yes, and as one does. For 2 weeks, he went on living as if nothing had happened until the authorities found him out. He pleaded guilty to the crime, and in 1959 was given a life sentence in the Nebraska State Penitentiary. Let's talk about how a 16-year-old was given a life sentence.
Yeah.
There had to have been, we don't know why he did this.
Right.
But he seems to have gone on to live a very normal life without murdering anybody.
Yeah.
So
I guess he learned from his mistake.
Yeah, I guess he literally was rehabilitated. I don't know. But I think maybe there was something going on in the household that caused him to do that. I don't know. When he was in prison, he was labeled a model inmate, but on July 14th, 1967, he escaped with another prisoner and went on the run. They parted in Chicago, where Arnold stayed for some time before moving to California. Then he simply vanished. The mystery has held the attention of many over the decades and was subject to a podcast in 2017. This Deputy U.S. Marshal Matt Westover was the man who cracked the case. Solving the decades-long mystery involved several years of research and hard work, he told the New York Times. His investigation took him across the United States to Brazil and Canada, then finally to Australia. So Arnold married 3 months after escaping, living with his wife and 3 stepdaughters in Chicago. During this time, he went by the name he would eventually die under. Investigators tracked John Vincent Damon's movements to Australia, where, with his second wife, he had 2 children and worked as a businessman until his death in 2010.
Well, you know what I want to know is how did he get to Australia? In other words, I would assume if you were a wanted criminal, that'd be very difficult.
So he assumed a different identity after he escaped, and probably used like the Social Security number of somebody he found in the obituaries, or something like that. After getting in touch with a member of Arnold's family in the U.S. and Damon's son in Australia, investigators conducted a DNA test. The results were a match, but the convict's Australian family had no idea of his torrid past.
How shocking! Can you imagine? I mean,
imagine finding that out.
And finding it out it's after your parent is gone, and you can't even ask them or confront them or, say, what the hell were you thinking? Or just the person that you knew and loved that, like you said, he was
a model citizen.
A model citizen, he started a new life and
which leads me to believe that there was probably some kind of abuse or something.
Yes, I mean, who knows what was going on at the time? But even with that, you figure someone who might have undergone some kind of childhood trauma might break years later and have another attack where the trauma comes back and they break the law. But it's nobody. This did not happen, and so it would just be shocking to think someone and then find out. I mean, look, we all have things in our past we don't talk about or whatever, it's not that like a murder, but as far as, things you don't find, maybe you wouldn't bring up with somebody you meet.
That you killed your parents.
Well, yeah, I mean, that kind of thing. No, but I'd imagine, gosh, my mom and dad, there's stuff from their past before I was born.
Everybody has something from their past.
That they wouldn't have shared with me because it wouldn't have been appropriate or whatever. And if I found out now, it would be like, oh my gosh, wow, really? Mom did that? Or dad, had that girlfriend or whatever.
Right. Well, it was kind of like when I found out. Well, I found out when I was a teenager that my mother had been married previously.
Yes.
But I didn't find out until long after she died, or just, I guess, after she died, that there seemed to be extreme abuse in that marriage, and she actually escaped that man. So, and she never talked about it, never, even to my father.
Right.
I mean, he knew that that it was something that.
I may have mentioned this on another podcast, but someone I know whose birth mother, she gave this guy up for adoption, and then she moved across the country and she married another man, not the father of the child. And she was married to him for 16, 17 years, and she divorced him, and she never told him that she had a child.
Oh, very common.
And then after she found her son as an adult, she did eventually tell her ex-husband. And I didn't just imagine that.
Interesting that she told her ex-husband that she felt that she needed to come clean with somebody that she was not legally connected to anymore.
Right, but they had, they were married.
A marriage, yeah.
So,
did she have kids with him?
No.
Huh.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So it's again these kind of secrets, but I mean, even that is a lot different than, well, I murdered my parents.
Than murder, certainly. Yeah, it is very, very common for biological mothers to not tell their loved ones about the child that they had and gave up because of the trauma it was, and because of how it was presented to them that they had sinned greatly and needed to go home and forget this ever happened.
Right.
So they took that literally. My mother was somebody who would have taken that literally too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? She was told things in her youth that she still thought were true. When she died, I mean, she still believed that flowers sucked the air out of hospital rooms. Even though she saw flowers in hospitals all the time, Have I told you this?
No.
She never gave me flowers. I don't know if flowers got a bad rap from my mom because of this. But she never gave me flowers when I would do a show because, and this comes from how cheap my parents were, but she would always hand me $5. So I guess she would have spent $5 on the flowers. But she would hand me $5 and say, flowers would just die anyway. Screw tradition.
Oh my God.
Right. So she never gave me flowers. And then when she had a surgery, when I was pregnant with Lily, she had a surgery. And I went up, I went up to her room after the surgery and I said, I would have brought you a plant because I know she liked plants, not flowers, because plants you can keep alive. And I said, I would have brought you a plant, but I don't think you would have appreciated it. And she said, well, they wouldn't have let you keep it in here anyway. I'm like, what are you talking about? And she said, you can't have flowers in hospitals. I'm like, Mother, have you seen hospitals?
Have you ever been to a gift shop in a hospital? They're filled with flowers.
Right. It's so weird that she never made that connection. Anyway.
It is an odd thing. People hear something in their youth and it becomes gospel.
It becomes, right? Yes, absolutely. And my mother was that way with many, many things,
right.
Which was quite frustrating, but hey.
My grandmother thought a bird in the house was bad luck. And I'll never forget, she had told me this. And then somehow a bird got in through the chimney and it was in the house. And it was terrifying, not just because the bird was flying around the house, which is terrifying enough. Right?
Yes, but as you've experienced.
Yes. But I guess it's bad luck because they're going to poop all over the furniture.
That is bad luck.
That is bad luck. But I mean, I'd imagine at one point, birds carry diseases or they're unclean or whatever it may have been that you don't want to have a bird in the house, from way back when.
Right. And disease is bad luck, certainly.
Yeah, so that's how the bird's got a bad rap.
Yeah. How many cases are there of people dying because a bird came in their house? I'd like to research that. I don't think I'd get very far.
Probably not. But, honestly, I would love to hear an interview with the son of this convict or, this escaped convict who is deceased and how he's processing, the man knew versus the man he was told.
Right. Yeah. So they apparently haven't spoken publicly. He spoke to Westover, the marshal who solved this.
Yes.
He said Arnold had changed his ways in Australia and ended up living a great life. And he was a great father, according to his children. He said he's glad Arnold is dead as he really wouldn't want to put their family through his arrest.
Are you watching Barry, the show Barry on HBO?
I'm not.
Oh, okay.
I'm not. Right. I need to. I know. There's so many things.
Read this story, it reminded me of it, and I hope I'm not giving any kind of spoiler, but
spoiler alert!
Spoiler alert! If you're watching Barry and you're not caught up,
thank you.
Barry,
good idea.
Yeah, Barry is a criminal. He's killed people, but in the episode now, they've skipped forward a little bit, and he's sort of living under another name, and he has a child who doesn't know about his past. And so I was thinking about that when I read that article, and it's I don't know what's going to happen because the show's not over yet. But
it's a full Barry situation, really.
Yeah, no good can come from this, as my mother used to say.
Yes. I love that.
On that note, I think we should take a break.
All righty then.
Thank you for listening to Cut Off Jeans with Julie Dixon Jackson and Richard Castle. You can support us by going to patreon.com/Cut Off Jeans podcast. Now, back to the program.
All right, it is time for part 2 of my 3-part conversation with adoptee and artist Emily Alber. Let me see where we left off. She was talking about, I guess she was talking about finding out about who her biological mother was and the trauma that she experienced as a teenager because she was very young when she found her. And it really messed with her, and she became an alcoholic and had lots of difficult moments in her youth regarding this. We're going to go further and talk about what has happened since then and how she got there. And it's a really interesting conversation. I kind of feel like a kindred spirit with Emily. So let's listen to what else she has to say.
Great.
know I cried a lot.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So weird. I feel like I definitely was kind of an emotional train wreck, like for the rest of high school.
Yeah, I bet. What did your mother tell you about your father at the time?
So this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
She told me that she just had a one-night stand, didn't really, and she was doing this to protect me. She had, a one-night stand, and that he just wasn't interested in her pregnancy or being part of the situation.
Okay, so she knew his name.
She thought she knew his name.
Oh, this sounds exactly like my story. Okay, go ahead.
The wrong name.
Yep. Okay.
And she had the right first name, the wrong last name.
Okay.
And it was a thing I brought up for years. Drunk, sober, whatever. I was like, who's my dad? Like, and another thing was, I didn't realize that another way with like how parents explain that you're adopted to you, because I only I saw my mom was pregnant with my sister, and I'd asked her, were you this fat when I was in your stomach? And she was like, oh, babies come into families in different ways. Well, it like being born wasn't explained to me. And so all I knew is that I didn't come out of her body. So I thought my dad was my dad until I was like, I lost my mind when I was like 12 or 13 years old.
Oh, wow.
Where I was like, you know who my mom is? Like, you slept with her. You know what I mean?
Oh, my gosh.
I'm like, I didn't. He's like, no.
That makes perfect sense, though.
It does, but I mean, people don't realize when you're talking to kids, like we don't put the pieces together. Like,
right.
We don't know. If you say, I just didn't come through your stomach, like, okay, but my dad's still my dad, right? Because no one comes through his stomach. So,
right.
And I was devastated. And I think that's when like really with the moodiness started happening with me, because my dad also was getting remarried. They divorced.
Oh,
and,
okay.
My stepmom's kind of a terrorist. So it's like, I really was like,
Oh, man, that's a lot of turmoil. Wow.
It was.
Yeah. That is so funny that you said it that way. For me, I'm sorry I keep going back to myself, but I can relate to you so much. The way I manifested how I've always felt was that because I didn't come from my parents and all my friends did, that I was an alien, or that I just kind of like landed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I didn't feel a connection. I literally didn't feel roots to the earth. And I felt like I was floating until I found my biological truth. I just felt like I was floating and didn't belong anywhere and to anyone. And like there was a complete disconnect. Like I was different from everybody.
I had a moment where, and this is like, sorry, but I was in the bathroom and I was like 10 or 11. And I remember the light being really bright in the bathroom. And I remember a thought going through my brain, just being like, you're not like anybody around you. And that it was very like, that may have been my like coming into awareness moment that I remember.
Yeah.
Where I was like, I am not like anything that you know what I mean? Like,
right.
I'm not anyone. I don't relate to anyone. I mean, it was weird. I have quite a few neurodiversities, which is kind of rough, but like they hadn't manifested at that point fully. So like all of them. So I know it wasn't mental illness.
Yep.
It was a true feeling of this isn't working. Like something just does not fit here. And I feel, I said something on Twitter once about, I feel like this cutout person, like this person who's like, on this planet and in this world, but I'm somehow like it's like being in like a totally different dimension, but you're still present.
Yes. It feels like other. It feels like you're other.
It is. And it's hard, and it's hard to relate, and it's hard. And then you have kids at school. You know, I had this lovely question one night with friends. So you're not related to your dad or your brother, so you could like sleep with them.
I mean, yeah.
I'm gross, but I guess. And I mean, it was disgusting. It was like, so being subjected to that stuff too,
Yes.
just like othered me because I didn't know how to process or recover from that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
What a crazy thing that nobody ever said that to me. But I think I probably thought that at the time, even though my brother's a sociopath. It's gross. But it was like, technically, we could have had a relationship. And I also could have had a completely romantic relationship with one of my siblings. And nobody would have been the wiser because of the secrets that were kept.
It's just disturbing how people feel like they can ask questions like that, though.
Absolutely.
It's like, who hurt you?
Yeah.
Like, why do you need to come at me like that?
Why is it okay for you to say that to another human?
Yeah. I mean, I know the person that asked me the most invasive questions, like, you know, I think she was struggling at home. So I don't, you know what I mean? It was whatever. It happens. People ask questions. People are weird, and people like to pick on people, and it's just hard. It's a little harder for us. And I was telling my mom when we went for a walk that I was like, you know, in family bullying, no one loves you. You can't play with us. You're adopted. You're fat, you're annoying, all this crap. And I know it was because my brother was very, very hurt by my parents' divorce. And I did things that were hurtful too. But for the sake of this conversation, like in family bullying like that, the adoption comments, not coming back from that as quick. Do you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
I'm not that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't grow up with, like, my brother was also adopted. But the bullying from him was intense from literally the moment they brought me home. But for it always, because I asked so many questions and acknowledged the differences in my family, and he didn't. So my brother was in denial that he was adopted, never told anybody, never told his own children that he was adopted, or the mothers of those children. That's how in denial, and how big of a secret, how important it was for him to keep that secret. But at the same time, it was kind of like, I felt like everybody was teaming up against me because I was asking questions. You know what I mean? My parents were much more comfortable with his denial.
You were the non-compliant, and he was the compliant. So that's like, we always end up becoming the scapegoats.
Exactly. Wow. So much interesting, introspective stuff to talk about. So at what point, how far into reunion with your mother did you decide you needed to find your father?
Okay. So it was probably 5 years ago. I had gotten back a DNA test, and I took an ancestry DNA test because I actually, to be honest, I was still living by the whole, this guy just wants to have nothing to do with me or with whatever. And I was interested in my heritage because tricky thing about genetic mirroring when it's not in your face, I couldn't process what I looked like. So I was literally always like, I have a weird face.
Yeah.
I don't really look like, I'm not sure. This is confusing. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. I have a weird face. That's such a good way to put it, because you look at yourself and you don't see anybody else.
No. And so I thought that I just had this unique, and not in a good way. I wasn't sitting here like, I'm so unique looking.
Right.
Literally was like, I don't look like a person. Like, I remember seeing my face and just being like, this is a weird ass face.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you can swear on your
No,
podcast.
absolutely. And
Okay,
ass isn't swearing.
I have this strange face that I had nothing to place, nothing. So I never knew it. Are you cute? Are you this? Are you that? Because I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
I have no idea. And so I was weird, and I've always been kind of strange, but like that, I mean, whatever. So that was a hard piece for me. So I took the test I also have ADHD that's like off the chain.
We have very similar characteristics, you and I. I can relate to almost everything you're saying. Okay.
And I love this is our first conversation. So
Me too. I feel like I've known you forever. It's crazy.
I know. We'll get it all out there and then we'll be friends.
There you go.
So I was dating someone at the time, and he was very important to me. And this biological father thing really is going to link into kind of my coming out of the fog and a number of other things. So if that's okay with you, if I
Absolutely.
kind of just try to put it together. Okay, so I was living in Utah at the time and met somebody, and I don't want to cry, but I loved him very much. And he wasn't perfect, but he was a really great person. And I'm not perfect either, but it was like one of those, he lost a parent when he was young. And so it's not the same, but there was a level of compassion that he gave me that I've never experienced before.
Yeah. Symbiotic.
Yeah. Whatever, I could just go on. But anyway, so we were in a relationship and we had started talking about having children and getting married. And we started looking at engagement rings and doing all of that. And that was really exciting for me. And I really felt like that I could start a family with this person and do things. He was very protective of me. And like I've explained to some other adopted people that he was very protective of me, and he made me feel safe, and like he like kind of like claimed me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
And that for someone like me was like everything. Like it was, he really, and he knew about all of the things that I was struggling with. Even if I hadn't totally identified them, he still was observing my struggles and all of that. And he never made me feel bad, ever. And he believed in me as an artist before I ever believed in myself. And I just like, I wish him well and hope he has like the best life ever. But anyway, so I'm glad he was with me during this stuff.
How long ago was this?
This was, this event was probably 4 years ago, I think.
Okay.
I went and I met my biological family in North Dakota, like face to face for the first time, like the, grandma, great uncle, like all that stuff. And I was on my way to Utah for the holidays with Andrew. And my biological mom called me and she was like, I heard you're looking for your father. And I was like, yep. And she goes, how much do you know? And I was like, I know a lot. And she was like what? And I was like, he murdered his brother. And she was like, yes. And I'm like, how did you meet him? And she was like, well, we were in rehab and he was in my group and they ended up hooking up either like outside of rehab in her car, or they went somewhere, like they were young. I hate like, you know what I mean? But that's what happened. Yeah. And it was really hard to learn about that. And
did your mother's family tell you this?
No, and they don't know about it.
So how did you find out about it?
Well, because I found his family first.
Oh, okay. That I see. Okay.
So they actually directed me. I was driving through North Dakota to get to Utah and stopped. They were like, you need to stop in Beach, North Dakota. Your cousins are like working at the courthouse and like have documents for you. And there's like 900 people there. So like, of course, it's like my family are the people that are working there. And like, we're, so weird. And he was a cop. And there's like debate on whether this was like accidental or I think there's people that want to believe it's accidental. I don't know. But anyway, so he ended up going to jail for a year and then going to rehab for a year. So I was like, ew. So if he wouldn't have like killed his brother, you two would have never hooked up. That's really scary. And that's
gosh.
like, that's when stuff just started clicking in my mind that like, there are these worlds going on that are like so I mean, this is one of those things, like we come with histories that, you know what I mean? There's just these complex realities that were occurring. It wasn't just, I'm pregnant and here, Emily's parents have my baby. It was like, there's this whole insane chain of events.
Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is she was like, and, I got a letter from him or from his wife saying that she didn't want to leave her husband alone, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, and then I wrote him a letter that he was responding to, telling him that I was pregnant. I was like, how could you do that if you don't know his last name? So we found out that my grandma wrote letters to both of them.
To both him and his wife?
He didn't have a wife. Oh. The wife was my grandma's female handwriting. Like,
what?
Do you know what I mean? So I figured that out when I was in Utah. But the worst part was when I called my sister, my adoptive sister, and everyone laughs when I use this voice, and I know no one here is going, but to me it's funny. I called her, and the first thing she said, because I didn't know she was about to do our family pregnancy announcement.
Oh my God.
So of course, I stole the fire. I call her, and I was like, I just found out that my biological father killed his brother. And she goes, why can't you just be grateful for what you have, Emily?
Oh my God. All right. I am so sorry to leave you guys hanging with that one. It was, but we ran out of time. Yeah. And I thought that was a fun place to end and force you to come back and listen in 2 weeks to the rest of the story.
Well, thank you, Emily.
So thank you, Emily.
Yes, and I am Richard Castle, and you can go to my website, richardcastle.com, and find out about my piano playing, my musical theater writing, and other various things that I do in my life. Actually, there isn't that much else. But anyway.
There's plenty.
Yes, or you can follow me on the Twitter, which I'm very, very occasionally on right now, at Castle Songs, and Instagram, which I'm also occasionally on, at Castle Songs.
Yes. And I wanted to mention briefly that I did an episode of Unraveling Adoption with a friend of the show, Beth Syverson.
That's right.
That is out now, and where I once again tell my story. And it's a really fun conversation. And it was fun to talk to Beth about it and for her to hear my perspective. Beth, as you remember, is an adoptive mom who is really at the forefront of educating adoptive parents about the issues that come with having adopted children and the issues that adopted children just face in life. So you can go check that out. There was another one that I was on recently, too, that I forgot to talk about. Oh, Simon. There's a podcast called Thriving Adoptees that I did with a British gentleman named Simon Ben that I did months ago. And I started talking, I kind of got off topic on it, and it got to a point where I was talking about my legal case. And it got to where we just kind of abruptly ended recording and decided to come back and start again because I thought I'd said too much or something. I don't know. But I think he forgot that.
Oh, no.
He forgot that he had shelved it, and he just like found it and released it. So it kind of has an abrupt ending, but I'm an open book at this point. I'm not afraid to tell the truth to anybody. So
you got nothing to hide now.
I got nothing to hide at this point. I mean, I never did, but I was afraid of legal repercussions because
right.
I'd had legal repercussions. Yeah. Anyway, so also you can find me at cutoffjeans.com. No, I will not surreptitiously collect somebody's DNA, but I will help you if you've taken a DNA test.
On that note, Julie, why don't you tell what you tell everybody if they contact you?
I tell everybody, regardless of what the question is, the truth is in your genes.